it's crazy, but it's
You're watching Channel Z, the world's leading zombie apocalypse channel. Broadcasting live from Studio Z.
Makes me act the way I do.
Hello and welcome to another pre-Valentine's Day edition of the Dr. Zed Show. As always, I am your host, Dr. Zed, aka Joe Alcock, MD, emergency physician at the University of New Mexico. Today we will, of course, be joined by our usual co-host, Athena Aktipis. And hi, Athena. There she is.
Hey, Joe. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good. I think today's a good day, and I'm excited because we have a great topic today and a great guest, an expert. Amy Boddy, PhD, will be joining us in a moment. She's a human evolutionary biologist at University of California at Santa Barbara in the Department of Anthropology. And she knows a thing or two about our exciting, mind-blowing topic. Truly, this is one of the things that I can't wrap my head around this idea. The idea that we are, I guess the question is, are we zombified by cells that come from our siblings, our babies, our mothers, our sexual partners, our grandmothers? And the way that this all ties together again is this idea of microchimerism. So that's going to be our topic, that we are microchimeric zombies. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, and not only, is this a super exciting topic, but it's for, Valentine's Day tomorrow. It's a heartwarming or heart invading topic, I suppose, right? You've got these cells that maybe actually inside your heart from your baby or from your parents or your mom or your grandmother.
Mm-hmm. It's an extreme sort of togetherness.
Yeah, so
right?
it's
all about togetherness.
It's a lot of togetherness. It might be too much sometimes, and I think it's a good example for us to kind of explore, when do we have cooperation between organisms that have different genetics? When is there conflict? Yeah. And when do we sometimes have them both at the same time? So, yeah.
So we will bring in Amy Boddy here in a moment. Mombies, right? Before that, though, please don't forget to give us your questions via YouTube or whatever platform you're using, and also smash that like button. Don't forget to do that. So let's bring her on. Let's welcome Amy Boddy into the conversation. Hi, Amy.
Hey, everyone.
So this is probably a long time coming. Yeah. We should have had you on the Dr. Zed Show some time ago, because this is kind of an obvious application of zombie science. This idea that we are, we have these cells kind of traveling back and forth between bodies and getting into places that, I don't know, maybe they should be there. I guess before we really dig in, maybe tell us a little bit about yourself and about this topic that you're interested in.
Yeah, thanks. Thank you for having me. My name is Amy Boddy. I'm at UC Santa Barbara. I study all things related to human health and evolution, and specifically, I'm really interested in pregnancy and the creepy things that happen during pregnancy, like the transfer of cells between the mother and baby that stay around for a lifetime.
So wait, what? These cells get transferred? How does that happen? Is that because we humans have an invasive placenta, so that allows these cells to kind of get in between the two partners during pregnancy, between fetus and mom? Is that what's going on?
Yes and no. That's a common explanation. Humans have a super invasive placenta. And so many people think that there's this spillover event that happens, right? But as more people study microchimerism, which again is this transfer of cells between individuals, what we're understanding is there might be an active migration that's happening between these two individuals.
Fascinating.
So we have already some great questions coming in.
Okay.
And so Liz is asking, how did you get into studying pregnancy in moms? And also, Liz asks, invasive placenta ?
Okay.
So,
Okay.
so
Gotcha.
so how did you get interested in this? And then how, what does it mean that humans have an invasive placenta? Is that different from what other organisms have? And what does that mean, if anything, for microchimerism?
Right. Okay. Good questions. Wow. How did I get interested in studying pregnancy? I think I've always been interested in the fact that we can grow something that's not genetically similar to us, half genetically different. I think it's the coolest part of biology. I think mammals in general are really fascinating from that perspective. And then obviously having my own kids, I became super interested in it. So, and then as an invasive placenta, yeah, humans are slightly unique. All mammals have in the uterine lining 3 tissue layers that are in the uterus, and different species have different forms of placenta that invade at different levels. And so humans and other primates, the fetal tissue actually invades through all 3 primary layers and actually attaches on to the mother's arteries that bed the uterine lining and remodel them. So it's a super invasive process. There's other species that have this, such again as primates, but also bats and other neat creatures. And then something like dogs have a middle layer invasive placenta, or cows that have just touches, and it's not very invasive at all.
So whether or not an animal has an invasive placenta, this potential sharing of cells can happen during pregnancy, right? So
yes.
Is it the case, let's get back to us humans,
yes.
That during pregnancy, there's more and more exchange of cells so that basically mom and baby become more alike genetically over the term of the pregnancy?
Yeah, we do see there's patterns. So it starts at around 6 weeks, cells start transferring over, and they accumulate in the maternal blood as the pregnancy progresses. So towards the end, you're supposed to see like the highest quantity of, fetal cells or baby cells in the maternal blood. The same is also true for the reverse. So there's maternal cells going into the baby. And this seems to, based on the circulation, have fewer cells transferring over, but again, accumulate over time. Yeah.
Wow. So what happens to these cells?
And this phenomenon
yeah.
of microchimerism can happen in species that don't actually have invasive placentas, right? You don't need to have an invasive placenta for it to happen. So how widespread is microchimerism if we look across species?
Well, I think when you look for it, you find it.
Wow.
They're just rare cells, but there's evidence in species that don't have this super invasive placenta, such as cows or dogs. They find evidence of microchimerism. So many times people think it's a byproduct of the super invasive placenta, but I don't think the evidence as we study it more actually supports that. I think it's not a byproduct of placentation. I think there's something active that's being able to migrate across this barrier between 2 individuals.
That's a really neat idea. And the idea that it's not just a random little thing that happens, that there's some adaptive function to this in one direction or another. That's a super cool idea. And I should mention, we actually, doctors Aktipis and Boddy wrote a paper. And for that paper on microchimerism, there's a video that I think that we might be able to show a little clip from the video abstract of that paper that will just give people a flavor of what this whole process is like. I wonder if we can do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a story about the mysteries of life, where myth meets reality, where science meets science fiction, where 2 bodies collide and fact is stranger than fiction. We all know where babies come from, but do we know the power of what they leave behind? Their reach extends far beyond the womb. As our protagonist, Dr. Boddy, is experimenting in the lab, an unstoppable transformation is occurring within. During pregnancy, fetal cells are passing through the placenta and into her body, integrating into Dr. Boddy's tissues and transforming her into super chimera. Fetal cells move right in and become the guests that will not leave. Until immediately following birth, super chimera cells spring into action, removing the intruders. Except that not all fetal cells are kicked out. Some fetal cells persist, staying for decades after birth, hiding, proliferating, and sometimes even transforming the body. What are these cells really doing to super chimera?
Love it. Love it.
Ooh, a cliffhanger. What are they doing?
And where do they go? So maybe we'll actually return to another video clip if we have time for it. But yeah, so many questions. Where are they going? What are they doing?
But let's talk about where do they go, and then we'll watch the rest of the video.
So every tissue that's been studied, they've found evidence for cells in the tissue. There's some mouse studies that look at this. Some mice also have an invasive placenta, and so it's a pretty good model to study microchimerism. Many of the cells end up in the lungs, the liver. There's evidence of heart tissue, and one of the coolest, the brain. There's evidence that these cells from a completely different individual end up traveling and migrating up to the brain, and that's for going into the maternal brain, and then maternal cells ending up in the fetal brain as well.
So are moms zombified by their babies? Is it changing their behavior?
I mean, that's a really open question that we could speculate on, but
let's speculate.
I mean,
this is what this is all about.
I mean, definitely. If you think from,
so let's take a sec and you know, like, because in this show, right, we adopt an evolutionary perspective, and usually like what's called an adaptationist evolutionary perspective, where you say, okay, you know, what would we expect to evolve given you know, what the adaptive problems are, and in other words, like, you know, what is possible from an evolutionary perspective, what kind of selection pressures are there going to be? And you know, Amy, you talked a little bit earlier about how it's not just random, right? That it seems like there's something going on that is not just like, oh, some of these cells as a byproduct of invasive placentas are getting into other tissues. So then that brings up the question of, like, you know, is what's going on in microchimerism almost like a unicellular life stage of humans? Like, you know, parasites will have like, you know, like toxoplasma as like different life stages. Like, you know, are there like adaptations that microchimeric cells have for manipulating the tissues that they're getting into, that are kind of like, you know, parasites will have adaptations at different stages to manipulate their host
hijacking resources and increasing resource delivery to babies. That kind of a thing,
right? Yeah. So if you think about it from like parent-offspring conflict, like that theory goes where basically offspring are 100% related to themselves. They want all the resources, where the parent wants to divide resources amongst all their offspring, right? So in other words, babies are needy and they're only interested in getting resources for themselves and not their siblings. And from that perspective, wouldn't it be a really neat feature to get your cells into your parent to change their behavior so they invest a lot in you? I think that would be really cool. Yeah,
there's so many sort of exciting ideas that derive from this idea of parent-offspring conflict. Where and the fact that this is sort of iterative, that it changes during the course of pregnancy, that it happens differently in different pregnancies. The fact that even grandmother cells can make their way into the baby, like, it gets crazy complicated.
Yes, there's transgenerational. So there's conflict too, right? The offspring probably wants to get resources, so it'd be best to go on and, manipulate the mother to, have an insurance policy that the mother cares and provides resources through, breast milk, but also just attention, and bonding. But that there's a limit to this, right? The mother is going to eventually push back on this because she has to reserve resources for her other offspring as well.
Yeah. And Emily Zorka had a comment a moment ago talking about, is she changed as a result of acquiring male DNA from her partner?
Right. And so many women, decades after giving birth to a son, still have this Y chromosome detection or male DNA detected in their blood, because these cells come over as undifferentiated, so stem-like cells, and then specialized into tissue that stay around for decades. Are we changed? Do we define that as a change? Maybe. Yeah. Yeah.
So I just wrapped up evolutionary medicine elective with medical students, and we talked about this topic, and we talked about how the risk of certain diseases can be are changed depending on how many pregnancies or the duration of sexual cohabitation you have with a partner. So, for instance, preeclampsia, which is a problem that happens in late pregnancy, is less likely the longer that partners have been together. And I wonder if microchimeric cells might play a role in that. This is getting way into speculation mode.
No, it's not speculation, because people have studied preeclampsia and microchimerism, and there seems to be a dysregulation there. And so, yes, maybe.
Yes, maybe.
But
I'll take it.
It's an indication. So the maternal immune system and the microchimeric cells probably have this really dynamic role that's happening over the course of pregnancy and for the lifetime, where there's, tolerance, but a little bit of conflict. And so what they're seeing is women that have miscarriages or preeclampsia, there's a dysregulation, and there's sometimes more microchimeric cells detected. And it's kind of a chicken or egg. Is it because there's more microchimeric cells, or is it because the immune system isn't acting properly in the mother that you see more? And there's just like an off balance happening here. Yeah.
Yeah. So Dave has a couple questions, but let's first take this one. So what is preeclampsia? And I mean, that's also a chance to talk a little more about genetic conflict and how, real it is for the viability of the mother, and how much of this has to do with like actually transfer of resources.
Right. So,
do you want to,
I was going to define it, but I feel like Dr. Zed might be the more official person to define preeclampsia. But
okay, so I'm not an obstetrician, but it's common in pregnancy especially in late pregnancy, to have pregnancy-induced hypertension. So the blood pressure goes up. If it goes up above a certain level, then we define it as preeclampsia. The pre part is because the really, really bad thing that can happen during pregnancy is eclampsia, and that's where the pregnant or post-delivery woman has seizures, and it can frequently lead to death. So eclampsia, thankfully, is relatively rare. Preeclampsia is not all that rare, and pregnancy-induced hypertension is even more common. And so work done by David Haig. Maybe you can tell us about that. But the basic idea is that as you increase the blood pressure in the maternal circulation, more blood and glucose and resources flow into the placenta and into the baby. And that can potentially lead to more resource extraction from mom. That's how I understand it, but maybe you have a different understanding. Uh-oh.
Oh, we can't hear you, Amy. We've lost Amy for a minute here.
We'll get her back.
You know what? I'm going to take this opportunity to show the other
let's show the other clip.
The video.
Yep.
Let's watch.
Can you hear me now?
We got you.
Yes. Video. Yes.
Amy's back.
We got you back.
I'm sorry. Hello?
Yeah.
You hear me now?
Okay.
We hear you loud and clear.
Let's watch the rest of the video. We'll watch the rest of the video.
Well, sometimes they aren't doing much. Sometimes they come to the rescue, racing to the site of injury to help Super Chimera heal. But Super Chimera's strength is also her greatest weakness. Her body is rife with internal conflict. Sometimes fetal cells want more than she can give. Helpful, harmful, it may seem fetal cells are a bit two-faced. Dr. Boddy and other scientists are working to unmask the mysteries behind Super Chimera's power and vulnerabilities for the good of man and womankind.
What a great video.
I love that video.
Yeah. And who is responsible for that animation?
This really amazing company, Indivio, but also my husband, who's
Wow.
invested in microchimerism as well.
Very talented guy.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah.
So getting back to the
Well, and
preeclampsia, as
I
you
think
saw
the
in-
video really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As you saw in the video, it
Go ahead.
showed all these different health conditions, right?
Yeah.
That are associated with microchimerism. And with preeclampsia, it's a really interesting condition that it seems like individuals need to have tolerance with their partner in order, and by tolerance we mean immune recognition. There's special cells that say like, this is okay, we won't attack it.
Right.
And there's some evidence that having multiple encounters with your partner is good for protection against something like preeclampsia. And individuals that have, first-time partner change or one-night stands are actually at an increased risk for preeclampsia. And it might be this negotiation between the maternal immune system and these foreign cells, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, we have some questions from Dave. There many of them are related here, sort of, trying to understand, well, so how could it be that you would end up with a phenotype with with the baby, the fetal cells affecting the mom in a way that could put the mom at risk of dying, right? So like eclampsia, which I think is also, it's related to this issue of like, well, what's going on in terms of the underlying conflict and cooperation here. So what's going on in that evolutionary balance and that interplay?
Right. So clearly it's in the baby's best interest if the mom doesn't die. But what we can see is sometimes there's this escalation of conflict, right? And so these situations where it ends up compromising the maternal health. And there's actually not much you can do once someone has preeclampsia other than eventually deliver the baby, as long as the baby is far enough along in the pregnancy, and that resolves it. And that goes back to the fact that we have an invasive placenta, and we're, the baby is in complete control of the maternal arteries and able to ramp up that blood pressure. And whether the baby, I love this question, are the microchimeric cells looking out for the baby or themselves or both? I haven't really thought about that before. I've in general thought about it in terms of looking out for the baby because they're genetically similar and it would be in their best interest. But who knows, these cells could go rogue as well, right?
Well,
Right.
I mean, you could imagine, and now we're wildly speculating, but that's what we do. So if you have, these microchimeric cells, and they are like another type of human life form, right? Like, because we know like there's dog contagious cancer, right? Which is like a single cellular form. It's like a single cellular species of dog. So these microchimeric cells, they could be like a unicellular species of human that can transmit over multiple generations. And if they can change the body in a way that makes it more likely that they'll transmit to future generations, then they're going to be represented in greater proportion in the next generation. So, I mean, again, wild speculation, but there could be like cell lines of microchimeric cells that are more common in the general population that came from the same ancestors. I mean, we don't know. Again, wild speculation, but it seems like it is possible that that could be the case given what we know about the transmission of these cells over multiple generations.
Right. You would see selection if you can. Why create a whole baby when you can just transmit generation to generation, right? So the fact that some people have cells in them from ancestors that are no longer alive is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. So there's evidence that grandmaternal cells, so, thinking about from the baby's perspective, 2 generations up at least. And you could see how that lineage could keep going as long as there's transfer of cells. And so wouldn't it be neat if as a cell just started hopping generations instead of going through creating a whole baby process?
Dave has all kinds of great questions.
Yeah.
Does the baby release these cells?
Dave, yeah.
Right. So they develop as early as 6 weeks. And so that's still, embryonic stage. We don't know where the cells come from, how they're actually migrating over, but we think they're stem-like. They can be coming from the placenta or the baby. We don't know.
So I think it raises so many questions, and I'm really gratified that there are people like you out there studying this phenomenon. But so how do you study this?
Very carefully. So they're rare cells, right? It can be 1 in a million in maternal blood to 1 in 100,000. And so the best is getting some kind of sample from blood. Usually getting it during pregnancy, you have a better chance of getting higher quantities of at least baby cells in the maternal blood. And then you usually have to have the mother and the baby's genotypes or special genetics so you can differentiate them because they're half identical. And so that gets very tricky at trying to figure them out. So there's a lot of overlap in the biomarkers.
Wow.
Yeah.
Mind blown.
Well, we're yeah, totally. This is also totally mind blowing. And I feel like whenever we sit around and talk about it, like the possibilities of what might actually be going on with microchimerism just like go into wild science fiction land like so quickly.
Right.
So I do feel like there should be like a whole category of like horror movies that are based on microchimerism. Like I don't understand why that's not like a thriving genre right now because there's so much to do.
Actually, my daughter is
the
reading
grafts of us.
Yeah. No, it's fine. My daughter's reading a book right now, my 6th grader, on there was a girl that had a twin in utero that didn't make it. And now that she's an adult, this twin ego is kind of manipulating her. And I'm like, oh, this book's about microchimerism. And she's like, whatever, Mom. But I was like, no, it really is. So yeah. I think it's on the edge there. It's coming. The next horror movie could be about it.
Well,
Yeah.
and also
I was going to say, we have one more minute.
The whole connection to mental health. Yeah.
So mental health connection.
I was just going to say, one thing that Amy and I speculated about in this paper was that things like, postpartum psychosis might be a result of the fetal cells manipulating the mom's brain to try to induce greater parental investment and the mom's immune system shutting that down and having this sort of back and forth where sometimes the fetal cells are kind of winning and then other times the maternal immune system is winning, which could lead to very erratic behavior, you could imagine, towards offspring, which is something that you see in postpartum psychosis. So a lot of potentially interesting connections that could be followed up and I think should be followed up in research.
Mm-hmm.
So much. So Amy, briefly, what's your overall take? Chimeric cells, are they good or bad?
Both.
Okay.
I think they're really important, and you can lead to conflict sometimes.
Wow. Well, I do think we'll leave it there. What an amazing topic. What an amazing guest. Thank you, Amy Boddy, for joining us. Thanks, Athena, for bringing a lot to this
Thank you so much,
conversation.
Amy.
But this is going to wrap up another fascinating episode of the Dr. Zed Show on Channel Zed. Until next time, I want you to stay safe. And for all of you chimeric people out there, embrace your inner zombie. And we'll see you next time.
And if the whole world says that we're crazy, we don't need nobody anyhow. But if you don't wanna fall in love, you better tell me right now. And if the whole world says that we're crazy, we can burn this motherfucker down. But if you don't wanna fall in love, you better tell me right now. You better tell me right now. You better tell me right now. Better tell me right now. Better tell me right now. You better tell me right
Bye.